the 1959 American romantic comedy called Some Like It Hot, was directed, produced, and co-written by Billy Wilder. The movie stars Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon in the lead roles, with a great supporting cast. The movie is about two musicians who disguise themselves by dressing up as women in order to escape from mafia gangsters whom they witness commit a crime. Now just think about it. You walk into a theater in 1959 to see a comedy that stars matinee idol Tony Curtis, the sex symbol Marilyn Monroe, and up-and-coming star Jack Lemmon. And you know it's directed by the same guy that gave you Sunset Strip a decade earlier. But when the projector starts to roll, you're faced with looking at a black and white period piece that's set in Chicago during Prohibition, with a bunch of scenes of gangland murder, and the two leading men in it spend most of the movie dressed up as women. Almost every way that you look at it, Some Like It Hot is a very weird film, based on the premise that these two hard-luck jazz musicians, played by Curtis and Lemmon, who witnessed the famous St. Valentine's Day massacre, and they have to go into hiding as women in an all-female orchestra. Through the whole film, they must navigate love and physical attraction, one of them completely lusting over the band's sultry singer, played by Marilyn Monroe, while the other is constantly pursued by a wily old millionaire. The film cuts completely against the grain, and it's probably a miracle that it ever got made. The oddness of the picture is probably one of the reasons that it connected so well with audiences and made it remain to this day an American classic. It's ranked number 14 on the American Film Institute's original 100 Greatest American Movies of All Time. This film was developed and inspired by two other older movies, one being the obscure 1951 German film Fanfares of Love, which was actually a remake of an older French comedy with the same name from 1935. Both of these films focused on a pair of desperate male characters doing whatever they could to earn a buck. And one of these schemes involved dressing up like women and performing in an all-female band. Billy Wilder just loved this particular device, but he didn't like much else in the movies. When he and his co-writer named Diamond began writing this particular screenplay, they needed to find a way to advance the story with an ironclad thing that would make these two guys want to be trapped in women's clothing for the entire picture. After they kicked around a few ideas, inspiration finally hit them. The St. Valentine's Day massacre popped into their heads. If they set this film during the Roaring '20s and had their guys witness one of the era's most brutal events, then the masquerade that they have to pull off is a matter of literally life and death. This invention in the plot made everything else in the movie possible. Once all the characters were in place for the film, it was time then to turn to more serious matters, and that would be the costumes. Lemmon and Curtis knew that if they were going to pass themselves off as women convincingly, they needed to really look the part, and that meant by using good clothes. Initially, the clothes that were chose for them weren't quite up to standard, and they put their foot down and said they wanted better dresses to make them look more genuine. They didn't want just off-the-rack stuff that was coming from the costume department. They wanted the same designers that were making the dresses for Marilyn's costumes to do theirs too. There's a great story that Tony Curtis tells about his experience when they were getting fitted for all these costumes, and it was at Marilyn Monroe's expense. They happened to be at Goldwyn Studios, and their dressing rooms were alongside each other. Jack, Tony, and Marilyn were lined up side by side in these rooms. Jack Lemmon comes out, and he's in a pair of boxer shorts, and he stands in front of the designer that's about to put the measuring tape around his neck and other areas of his body. He rattles off a variety of measurements: 16, 31, 29, 18. And he finished all these measurements on Jack. Then he came up to Tony and did the same kind of measurements on him. once he had finished with him, then he went over to Marilyn Monroe. When she comes out, all she has on is a pair of panties and a silk blouse. He stands there and measures 29, 34, 18, and goes around her waist and rear. Then he looks at Marilyn and says, "You know, Tony Curtis has got a better ass than you do." She immediately unbuttoned her blouse, opened it up, and said, "Yeah, but he doesn't have boobs like these." Upon the initial screening and kind of sneak preview that they had for the film, there was a pretty bad reaction that audiences had, and people actually got up and walked out. Many of the studio personnel and the agents offered a variety of advice to Billy Wilder on what scenes needed to be reshot and what needed to be added and cut. Jack Lemmon asked the director what he was going to do. Wilder turned and looked at him and said, "Absolutely nothing. This is a very funny film, and I believe in it just the way it is. Maybe this is the wrong neighborhood in which to have shown it." He stated that he just never got into a panic over one preview audience. The very next preview was done in the Westwood section of Los Angeles, and the audience stood up and cheered. Now, Marilyn Monroe started out pretty good in the film. She showed up on time, but as shooting went along, she kind of took a spiral downward and was often late to the set, sometimes not showing up at all, and consistently blowing her lines and requiring multiple takes of every scene that she shot, even very simple scenes. It took 47 takes to get the line, "It's me, sugar," correct. Instead, she kept saying, "Sugar, it's me," or "It's sugar, me." After about the 30th take, the director had the line written on a blackboard. There was another scene where she was required to rummage through some drawers and make the statement, "Where's the bourbon?" After 40 takes of her saying, "Where's the whiskey? Where's the bottle? Where's the bonbon?" Wilder ended up pasting the correct line in one of the drawers. But that wasn't the end of this problem. Marilyn became confused about which drawer contained the line, so the director had to go through and paste it in every drawer of the dresser. 59 takes were eventually required to get this scene done. And when she finally does say it, she has her back completely to the camera, which leads a lot of people to wonder if the director just got fed up with it and had that line dubbed. The director, Billy Wilder, and Marilyn Monroe at one time were very close friends. By the end of this movie, they were enemies. The biggest piece of this film was hands down casting Marilyn Monroe in the role of the singer. It went on to become one of her most iconic roles. As a matter of fact, she was even depicted in her role as Sugar on a U.S. postage stamp that honored Billy Wilder. And this film really showcased the many talents that she had as an actor, comedian, and just all-around performer. Initially, the director thought of casting Mitzi Gaynor in this role. But then Marilyn Monroe became available, and he jumped at working with his 7-year itch star again, even if it came with some baggage. And he knew from the start that there were going to be some crazy moments dealing with her. In his mind, he told himself, "Hell, I'm not married to her. All I have to do is make it through the day, go home, take a sleeping pill, wake up in the morning, and start at it again." Initially, he noticed that she showed up for rehearsals on time and was great. She remembered all her lines, and he even stated that she had almost an elegant vulgarity about her, which he felt like was very important. She seemingly automatically knew where the joke was. But with all this good came the bad, and as time went on, she would show up hours late for work, claiming that she had lost her way to the studio. And then, as I mentioned before, the numerous takes on very simple lines that she had to remember, and she just couldn't do it. All of this dynamic put terrible strains on the director and the rest of the cast. After shooting was done, the director made some pretty soured remarks to the press about his dealings with Marilyn. He stated that he questioned whether Marilyn is actually a person at all or one of the greatest DuPont products that was ever invented. She has breasts like granite, she defies gravity, and has a brain like Swiss cheese, just completely full of holes. He went on to make the statement that he was too old and too rich to ever go through anything like this experience again. This prompted Marilyn to call his home and to give him a terrible tongue lashing that went on for a few minutes. Eventually, as a little bit of time passed, Billy Wilder had the idea that he ought to try to patch things up. But shortly before he did this, she was found dead. As the years have gone by and he's forgotten what a struggle it was to experience working with her, he's kind of lightened his views on the problems that he had with Marilyn. He even states that he really didn't have problems with Marilyn. Marilyn had problems with Marilyn. And he says that when it was all said and done and his stomach finally got back to normal, it seemed well worth the agony of working with her. Some Like It Hot opened to critical and commercial success. And this is definitely one of the greatest films of all time. Take a look at this if you've never seen it. You'll thoroughly enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.